So for example, if you are a hazmat carrier, passenger carrier, you're going to have some things that are going to be a little bit different from, say, just a common carrier. If you're intrastate versus interstate, there could be some differences. So for that kind of thing, feel free to reach out after this. Be glad to help you with that. But let's go ahead and move forward. I think you guys probably covered this. Hi, there's Rick. Rick is another one of our colleagues. Um, Rick is actually he is one of our FMCSA compliance specialists. Rick is a retired Virginia State trooper with the motor carrier unit. He used to do audits. So he brings with him a wealth of knowledge from the enforcement side. So feel free to pick his brain. So Rick, this is where we're at right now. We're with disqualifying offenses. And this is something that the employer really wants to look at, not just when hiring a driver, but you want to do this on a continuing basis. So this would be driving a CMV under the influence of alcohol, under the influence of a Schedule I controlled substance. Now, of course, I'm not going to get into marijuana too much on this, but we did have a recent reclassification of marijuana from a Schedule I to a 3. But for you guys in the trucking industry, nothing's changed. You're still going to treat marijuana as a Schedule I. And of course, transportation, possession, unlawful use while on duty, leaving the scene of an accident while operating a CMV, or a felony involving the use of a CMV. So these would be things that you're going to want to take a look at. Okay, out of service order violations. So, if you see this, let's say you pull a PSP report and you see that this driver has had these out of service violations, you're going to want to look at really how many they have had and what that time period would be. Okay, so if you're looking at a 1 to 5 year period, 2 violations and a separate incident during any 10-year period, that would be a disqualification, or 90 days to a year conviction of a first out of service order violation. Rick, would you like to speak to this from your side when you used to do audits and you went in and looked at carriers? Would you like to speak to this a little?
Yes, this is one of the things which we looked at very closely, especially drivers who are getting out of service orders, not only from a safety perspective, but also from a civil perspective, because if you consistently have drivers who are getting these out of service orders and they continue to drive for you, if you happen to have an accident or a crash, which one you want to call it, it's going to look very favorable and it's look very favorable to the person who is against you. These out of service violations, they're in the book, and sometimes we catch them roadside, but 90% of them you're going to catch when you check their license. Go back and check their license.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, and this describes a little bit further as the penalties escalate for repeat offenders or higher risk operations. And those higher risk operations, of course, are going to be your hazmat. And that risk is going to elevate depending on what you're transporting. So if you're transporting, I'm just going to say batteries versus, say, Class A explosives, or any kind of nuclear waste, and that tends to be fairly rare. But the higher risk operation you have, really the more you need to evaluate this. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward. Okay, so let's get to the nuts and bolts, your basic driver qualification file documents. So we're going to go through each one of these documents as briefly as we can. And Nicole, you'll have to let me know when our time is up, since I think we've got our times a little skewed. But the first would be a driver application for employment. This is not a standard employment application. This is very DOT specific, and we're going to talk about that. Your safety history investigations. Now, that changed in 2023 with the clearinghouse, okay? Because when you used to do these, you had to send these out asking about substance abuse history, and safety history. So the clearinghouse really, for the most part, there's still a couple of things out there, but for the most part, took the place of that. But we'll talk about that a little further. Right now, you still, even with NR2, you still want to have a copy of that current medical card. You want to generate an MVR upon hire. Then you want to generate an MVR annually. And in conjunction with that, you want to conduct an annual review. And we're going to talk a bit about that. I think over the years when I've done audits, and I know Rick can really affirm this, when we go in and let's say I'm looking at a client and they have all of their annual reviews, they've got their reports, and then they've got their annual review form attached. It's not uncommon for me to see, say, an administrative assistant signing off on that, which is really not what we want to see. We want to see the safety team, safety director, safety coordinator, whatever that title may be. We want to see something with somebody with knowledge signing off on that and really evaluating that record. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Road test certificate or copy of CDL. Okay, we'll get into that. Prior 7 days, hours of service upon hire. Intermittent or casual driver documentation. That's a little different. And then multiple employer documentation. Okay, so let's dive into each one of these. Okay, so when you want to format these, just very briefly, they can be electronic, which is becoming very popular, an electronic format, or still you can have hard copy. Okay, what we see is kind of a real mix. Usually the smaller motor carriers, say the owner operator, they have just a few drivers. Sometimes they tend to really stick with paper files, but we're seeing the carriers that have multiple drivers, even from 10 to 15, 20 and upwards, we're seeing them really transition over to the electronic format, and that's a really good option. We do have an electronic platform, and I find that it's great because it really maintains consistency. So it's going to make sure that when those drivers fill out that application, they have to put that information in. And I'll kind of elaborate a little bit about what I'm talking about there. So once you establish that initial DQ, the employer has to establish a method of monitoring these expiration dates. So this is really important if you're doing paper, because you're not going to have anything to pop up and go, oh, this is a reminder. That's another really good feature of the electronic formats, because most of these programs, I know ours does, and I think most of them do, they have the feature that once you put in the CDL expiration dates, those medicals, those annual reviews, really anything else that has to be recertified or really renewed on a regular basis, it's going to shoot out a report for you. But if you're going to maintain paper files, you're going to want to establish some sort of way to do that, to keep up with those expiration dates. Rick, do you want to speak with that on how much you used to see when you did audits? You would go in and things would be expired?
We ran into a lot of expired medical cards, and the other thing that we ran into was old driver application forms, employment forms. That would be forms which were used in the 90s, and maybe the trucking company didn't start till 2005, but they had a friend who had a trucking company in the 90s, and they would get their application, and the applications would have about half of the required stuff on it. I mean, we ran into that a lot. And the one thing here, even after you let a driver go, you've got to keep this information for 3 years.
Correct. Absolutely. And you want to maintain them in a secure location with controlled access. So what that's really saying is if you're going to keep paper files, especially, I would keep them in a locked cabinet that really only those with a need to know can access. If they're electronic, you want to make sure that only those with a need to know have passwords. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and move forward. All right. We can go ahead to the next slide, please. Okay. So the key points, again, it is an FMCSA specific application. Standard employment app is not acceptable. There is on the Motor Carrier Safety Planner on the FMCSA website, they have the current DOT application that you can use. Okay. So that is something that's going to be really, really important. It has to be completed in entirety, signed and dated by the driver. Now, this is what I was referencing earlier. One advantage of electronic, and I'm not a proponent one way or the other. I don't really care if I'm going to do an audit as long as they're compliant. It can be paper or it can be electronic. But one of the advantages of electronic, most of these programs will not let a driver continue until they put all the information in that's needed. Okay. So in other words, they have to put in um, all of their employers. They can't leave gaps in employment. They have to put in and they have to sign and date it, because I know some of these paper applications, when I've done audits in the past, these paper applications, oh my goodness, they're all over the place. Okay. All right. They have to provide
Can
at
I
least,
add something?
yes,
Can I? Uh,
absolutely. Go ahead, Rick.
that is one thing that I think the electronic driver files will do. If when the drivers originally do these files and you make them put all the paperwork in before it will let the application upload, I think it's going to help you have all the material you need rather than going back and trying to get it. And the very best time to get all the paperwork you need from that driver is when he wants a job, not once he's already got a job.
Exactly. That is a great point, because when we go into clients and maybe they're having an audit and we're doing a pre-audit and we see that that for whatever reason they haven't completed the app right, they have missing documents. I mean, then we begin this chase around with this existing driver. We need this, especially in a larger company that maybe they have different terminals and we're depending on managers to get with those drivers. It can be a challenge to try to bring these things into compliance if these drivers are already hired, because they're thinking, well, why do I have to do this? I've been here 5 years. It's very, very important. Okay. So the 3 years of previous employment history, no gaps. Okay. If they've been maybe deployed in the National Guard, they've been unemployed, maybe they went to school, maybe they were in jail for some reason, you have to account for any gaps between those employment periods. Okay. It's really, really important. DOT wants to know, where have you been? You can't hide anything from us. That's really kind of what they're looking at. And then they need to put an additional 7 years of history on the driver application. All of the compliant DOT driver applications, they will instruct you. They will say provide the previous, all employers for the previous 3 years, and then for an additional 7 years, list any employer for where you operated a CMV, a truck. Okay, so that's
The
that's what
seven
they're
years,
looking for.
the 7 years additional employment is for CDL drivers.
Yes, that's a good point, Rick. If any of you have non-CDL operators, okay, that cross state lines, in other words, they're driving those vehicles with GVWR 10,001 to 26, or those passenger carriers 9 to 15. Okay, those guys don't have to have a CDL. They don't have to be in a drug testing program, but you do have to have a driver file. And there are some differences in the driver file, and that's what Rick is referencing. So for your CDL operators, you got to have a little bit more than you do on the non-CDLs. Okay, so for the non-CDLs, it's only the 3 years. So just want to make that clear. Okay, let's move forward. And this is an example. You can kind of pop the slides forward, because this is going to go through, this is your basic driver app. Okay.
You refreshed on you, Kim. It's got you now.
I'll wait for Nicole.
Yeah, I don't know what
She'll
happened.
get it back up.
It
She'll
just
get it.
It'll
I
just
have
jump
full
off.
confidence.
Gotta love technical.
You do, man. I mean, it's always just throwing us curveballs. I'm with you.
All right. While I'm pulling everything up, everyone, how are we feeling? I hope we are learning and definitely growing today, because I mean, even myself, I tell people you can never know enough. Especially I'm not behind the desk or the wheel anymore. So it's important we rely on our partners, and it's important to hear this type of information so that we're able to make sure that we're presenting it to you and that you're able to implement it into your operations. And if you don't know how, that's why we have these amazing partners. Thank you, FleetSafe Solutions, for just providing this information so that we are able to, make sure our people are in line and stay in line. All right. So let's see if I'm able to continue the screen. And again, we are so excited to continue to grow and learn. Thank you all. Just 1 second here. All right. It's not acting properly at all. Let's see. Not sure what happened there. All right. Sorry, guys. I wasn't able to make it any bigger without it causing a problem.
Works.
All right.
That works.
Awesome. All right. So we'll try to get where we were. Pick up your pens and your paper, and we're going to keep going. We officially end at 1 Eastern time. So we'll probably go for another 10 minutes so we can open it up for questions. Yeah. We want to make sure that we're here to answer those questions. If you're here, that means you are in the business, okay? If you're catching the replay, you are in the business. Now is your time to connect. And again, catching the replay gives you the opportunity to still connect with our partners. All right, go ahead, Ms. Kim.
Okay, what I'm seeing is your Microsoft Word menu. Yeah. There you go. There you go. Okay. All right. So let's move forward. So I tell you, let's do this, Nicole. Just kind of flip forward every few seconds, unless I tell you to hang on for a second.
Cool.
Okay. Because what this is doing, this is just giving you an idea of what those sections on that driver app is going to look like. And these are the required components. Okay. Now we have, again, a free driver app. Okay. All right. So let's hold on. So keep going forward. Okay. So the safety history. This is really important, guys. Okay. And I have had this so many times. I've had this question so many times. And I know Rick has too. And Val, I think Val popped on. But the bottom line is the hiring employer has to document your attempts to get this information. And I know people get really frustrated because they can't get it. We can't get them to respond, or the driver didn't give us enough information, or they're out of business. What do we do? What you are responsible to show is that you made the attempt to try to get that documentation, to try to reach out to that previous employer and get the information that is required. So the safety history investigation form, and again, we have those. We'll be glad to send them to you. It is signed off by the driver, it's signed off by you, and then it goes to that previous employer. So you have to do this within 30 days of hire. It is recommended that you make 3 attempts. You can do that by email, call, or mail. Okay. So it's really important. If you do not do this, you're going to have a problem in an audit. You got to at least try to get this info. So make sure that you do this. So let's move forward.
Yeah.
Yes. Hold on. We've got Val wants to make a comment.
It's helpful if you have a notary public or access to a notary public after you've made that 3rd attempt, document it, date it, and then you've got that in the records in case anything comes up later in a civil case.
Right. That is very important. So, if you can get that verified and confirmed after the 3rd one, that 3rd attempt, because these people are being boogers, they're not wanting to respond, document your attempts. Okay. Okay. So let's move forward. And again, just kind of keep flowing. This just gives you an idea of what it looks like. Okay. Okay. So again, the clearinghouse, when you generate that full query from the clearinghouse, when you're going to hire a driver, you've got to do that DOT drug screen, get that negative result. And of course, since 2020, and then as of 2023, that's when that 3-year gap closed. So at this point in time, by pulling that full query from the clearinghouse and doing these safety histories, you are satisfying that 40.25 requirement. Okay, so just making sure that you guys understand that. So let's move forward. So medical card. Now, we will try to get through this one pretty quick because, again, we want to have plenty of time here. So The medical card, again, it's required for non-CDL employees in interstate commerce, GVR or combined GVWR, 10,001 to 26,000 pounds, non-CDL employees in operating a CMV in interstate commerce, passenger 9 to 15, including the driver. There are some exemptions. Remember, I said some operations, this is not a one size fits all. So it's always a good thing if you have any question about, does this apply to my operation? Please reach out and let us help you determine that. So it is required for all CDL employees, and with every new medical card, guys, this is so important. If you don't remember anything else, remember this. Within 5 to 15 days, and I recommend you go upwards to 10 to 15, just to give your DMVs time. Within 5 to 15 days, the motor carrier must generate an MVR to confirm that the driver submitted everything to the SDLA, State Drivers Licensing Agency, DMV, different names for them, but that has been submitted. Now, the driver doesn't do it anymore, theoretically, except for 2 states. The only 2 states, I think that there's 2 left. There's Alaska, and there's another one left. There's only 2 states left right now that have not integrated totally with FMCSA and this whole NR2. So theoretically, what is supposed to happen when these drivers renew, the medical examiner submits to FMCSA, FMCSA submits to the SDLA, State Drivers License Agency, okay? That is what is supposed to happen. Your drivers, for the time being, still need to come in, give you a copy of that medical card. You need to know when they're being renewed, because it is your responsibility within 5 to 15 days of that renewal to pull an MVR. Okay, this is a big problem we're seeing, and a lot of people miss this piece. So you've got to pull that MVR to make sure that everything came through correctly. So that falls on the carrier. And just one more quick tip on these medical cards: until everybody is totally on board, all states are on board, this is flowing well, which we're getting pretty close, I would really recommend that your driver still carry a medical card. They do get pushback sometimes from a medical examiner. They'll go, well, we don't have to give you this anymore. They have a right to get a copy if they want it. So if you have problems, just let us know, okay? So let's move forward. This is just a sample of what it would look like. And you want to verify on the National Registry, although right now, theoretically, the fact that it was submitted to FMCSA is the verification. But for now, I would still do that. These are basically what's checked. Okay, I'm not going to dive into this too much because of time, but the driver needs to bring prescriptions, anything related to diabetes control, glasses, contact lenses, hearing aids. If he has any FMCSA medical variances, he needs to take that with him to the DOT physical. Okay, so let's move forward. Here's some common reasons they're failed: loss of limb, foot, or hand. It impairs the ability to operate the CMV. Many states, at times, they will evaluate this. You may get a waiver. It's just going to depend on the extent of this. And most often it's limited to intrastate only. So it really depends on that. Excuse me. So if they've had recent surgery that affects the cardiovascular or neurological system, if the ME says it's of concern, that could be an issue, okay, if it's not controlled. Now, this next one people don't realize: diagnosis of alcoholism or controlled substance abuse. This can be a real issue. This can affect your non-CDL operators. You know, people think, okay, well, drug testing doesn't apply to them. DOT regs don't apply to them. In this case, it does. So if there is an official diagnosis on record, this can be a problem unless they can prove they've been through treatment and they're in a follow-up program. Poor vision or deafness, narcolepsy, epilepsy, poorly managed diabetes, poorly managed heart or lung disease. These are the most common that we see that creates failed medicals. Okay, so let's move forward. And you want to keep these on file. You want to have best practices to have 2.
I'm sorry. I don't know why it keeps timing out.
Yeah, we just have just a bit to finish and then we're done. I'm going to do a zoom through it real quick once you get
If I
it
can
back
ever
up.
get her back up.
I know technology always just
Oh, only when you
always,
need it, though,
it
everybody.
does. It just shines the brightest when you need it, doesn't it? And of course, you know I'm being facetious there. We
Sorry,
run
guys.
into it too.
I'm sorry, guys. We're just trying to get it back up and running. Hopefully, I'll be able to share my screen in a minute. Thank you so much. And again, hopefully, you're learning so much because I know that I am. And takeaways are really, really great. All right. So, again, give me one more second here. Try to get this back up and running. And I think I just got it. Wonderful. All right. Going to share my screen and Kim allow you to continue with the amazing
Okay.
knowledge.
So let's buckle up because I'm going to be going fast
All
through the
right. Let me
rest.
get back to where we were.
Yeah.
We're good. See if you're catching the replay, you're catching the Zoom version. Boom, 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 boom.
Okay. So back up a little bit. Back up a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, keep backing up. Here's where we want to be. Let's keep going back. A few slides back. Okay. Okay, here we go. Let's park here for a second if you want to move forward to the next slide. Okay. So, just to let you guys know, there used to be a form that had a certification of violations at the top of it that drivers every year you would go and ask them, okay, list all of your convictions that you had this year. Okay. That's no longer required. All you have to do is pull this MVR on a regular schedule and on time. Guys, don't do it 14 months one time and then do it, 12 months and then 16 months. Do it on the 12-month schedule. Get it on your calendar. Okay. Now, if you're using electronic DQs, they'll prompt that. They get that out 60 days beforehand. So generate your MVR. And then when you get those MVRs, please review and evaluate them. I mentioned this earlier. Make sure that you've got a safety director or someone knowledgeable, or if you don't feel that you have that in your organization, hire consultants to do it that are very, very well versed in how to evaluate these MVRs. So let's move to the next slide. This is just a sample. It's a 3-year annual review record. This is straight from FMCSA's website. So what they like to see are 3 years of these, and then they want to see where you have qualified that they're safe or they're disqualified. Remember, we talked about that earlier, or that everything's okay, and you have to sign off and date this. So let's move to the next slide. So when you do that annual review, and this is too small to read here, but absolutely, if you want these PowerPoints, you're welcome to reach out to us or Nicole. You can have them. But the bottom line is on reviewing your MVR content, at a minimum, what you're looking at is what are their points? How many accidents have they had? What has happened in the CMV versus what has happened in the personal vehicle? What has happened in the CMV is where it's really important, because if you've had certain violations within a 1 to 3 year period in the CMV and you have a certain number of those, then what happens, they're going to be disqualified. And a lot of times, and Rick and Val can speak to this, usually sometimes your DMVs do this. I get that question, well, doesn't DMV do this? Not necessarily. So you guys want to speak to this when you did audits, what you saw and what you recommended?
A code section they may want to be familiar with is 383.51. It's a series of charts. And the fact that the CDL is still valid, if they have been convicted of certain things, that you may, as a carrier, have to suspend them for so many days to show that you're not complicit with their driving activity. And that chart helps you break down what affects you and what doesn't. When you do your
Absolutely.
MVRs, just don't simply put it, I've got it, he can drive, good, he's got his valid license, and you just put it in your files. You need to review it and see how that affects you before you file it.
Really evaluate these guys. And if you have questions, just let us know. Just truly
You know,
evaluate what you're getting. Yes.
may I add here too, when they're reviewing these DMV transcripts, they need to make sure that the medical card is entered in there properly too,
Yes.
not accepted interstate.
Yes, that is so important. We see that's a fairly common mistake, and it can create problems roadside. Okay, so let's move forward. We've got just a few to finish up, and then we can take questions. And this just goes through what are these serious traffic violations if they have two or more. Okay, so let's move forward. Now, intermittent and casual drivers, just briefly, I just want to let you know there is a form when you hire a new driver or you have a casual or intermittent driver. There is a form that they have to complete when you hire them. It has to document their 7 prior days hours of service, or if they're coming from another carrier, they can bring their hours of service records if it's complete. If not, they have to fill this form out. If you're using anybody intermittently or casually, every time they come on duty for you, you're going to have to get them to document the 7 days, prior 7 days hours of service. Okay, because it's so important, because if they're like a multiple employer employee and they're driving for another motor carrier, oh gosh, you got to really keep up with this between carrier to carrier. Really important. So let's move forward. That's what it looks like. So can move forward. This one is kind of very similar. There's a multiple employer form. You're not required to maintain a complete DQF. It tells you what you can have at a minimum, but one of the employers somewhere has got to have everything. So if you've got a driver that's driving for someone else in addition to you, or maybe you own 2 companies, you got to be really careful with this. Okay. All right. We're just about there. Move forward, please. And kind of, this is just driver instructor. This tells you what you have to have on those guys. So we'll move forward. Okay. Now, if you want a customized packet, you want a demo of our electronic DQ platform, you want a checklist, or you feel like you want a compliance review, just give us a buzz. We're happy to help. But right now, I would like to take questions if anyone has any, and give you an opportunity to ask. And I'll depend on Nicole for that, since I don't have access to the chat box.
No problem. I will go ahead and get great information. Thank you so much for your feedback, Donna. This is information that I think that a lot of individuals are just not implementing in their operation on a day-to-day. How crucial is that to your operation by not adhering to the day-to-day or just hiring properly?
Oh my goodness. It is a problem, because Nicole, the issue is this is cumulative. And I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that we have a motor carrier, and what we see a lot of times is they just didn't realize what they had to have to a great degree. Now that's not an excuse. That's not going to give them a free pass, but most of the time they just didn't know. But if there is a bad accident, I'm saying a catastrophic accident that is going to put the spotlight on them, either from FMCSA or some of these attorneys. We all see the billboards out there. If you're in a truck accident, just call us. Let me tell you guys, I've been in this industry a long time, and the environment right now for lawsuits in the trucking industry is huge. It's just huge, because these attorneys for the plaintiffs, they know these regs. They learned them. They know them. So they know what you have to have. And the problem is, when that happens, if you have not kept these records up and established these and these processes, these procedures as you've been going along, you cannot reconstruct this and create this within 24 to 48 hours or even a week.
Right.
You just can't. So it's super important to understand in all of the components: driver files, hours of service, maintenance, drug testing. What is it that I have to have? financial responsibility, accident registers, because those things can be very difficult to try to pull together in a very short time. So being proactive rather than reactive with this definitely is what you want to be thinking about.
That's really good, guys, especially for some of you guys, the old, I call them the old timers, old schoolers. I know my business. I've been doing trucking. I'm third generation. Guys, things change. And this is why we
Yes.
jump inside of these forums so that we're able to understand what has changed and how that can actually affect your operation. I mean, the first two slides that I covered, it talked about some of the qualifications that are no longer. And so I brought up English speaking. What are some of the things that are? What are some of the practices that some of the carriers are taking that possibly had drivers that didn't speak English? What are they doing right now in order to ensure that their operation isn't compromised and to keep everybody in compliance? Do you have any feedback on
Yeah,
that?
that is a great question, and I'll let Rick and Val speak to that too.
Uh,
What we are seeing is they can't. FMCSA has gotten so aggressive. If these guys do not speak proper English, it really is going to fall on the motor carrier to determine, okay, to what degree do we want to assist them? Do we want to bring in tutors? What do we want to do? Because at the end of the day, FMCSA is going to expect that motor carrier to ensure that those drivers can speak English proficiently enough and well enough to communicate and read signs. So the onus is really on the motor carrier because the states haven't done a great job with this. And that's what
this,
they're trying to fix now and realign. Val, do you want to add something?
yes, ma'am. This is not brand new. Not being
No.
able to communicate in English and read English was out of service in the CVSA out of service uh, criteria for years. And then around 2008, it was relaxed and they kept it for
Mm-hmm.
hazmat. And now it's come back front and center on it. So it's not a new concept as far as the federal code goes. It was just relaxed as far as being an out of service violation.
Yeah, and what Val is saying, that is true. As long as this has been, my career, it's always been there in the qualification piece. But the problem is, it is, I think, with the occurrence of some of these really high profile accidents, where it was pretty clear that the drivers either couldn't read the signs or they didn't understand really truly what the traffic laws are, and then we had the fatalities. We had a bus crash here on Interstate 95 about a month or so ago, and it turns out the driver had problems. I mean, there were real problems with that, and there were quite a few fatalities. So they've really put a spotlight on this, and I was able to attend a conference last month where the FMCSA administrator, Derek Bars, was in attendance. He spoke, and I had a chance to talk to him. And I just, I thanked him. I said, thank you guys for all of the work you're doing with this. And he goes, well, let me tell you, he goes, we are just getting started. So this is going to get probably more intense for a while because they're trying to weed this out. So they're saying to the motor carrier, you either need to figure this out, how you want to get these drivers proficient, or you're not going to let them drive. That's the long and the short of it.
Right. You guys heard it first from our safety and compliance partner. Thank you guys for joining. Hopefully you took away at least 5 nuggets because I took at least 10. All right. And that's what this is about. If you're not learning and you're not growing. And growing is part of what makes our businesses successful and makes us successful as entrepreneurs, business owners, all right, and those that serve within our industry. So I want to thank you guys for stay safely so much for coming and just making sure that you were able to shed been around but possibly lax or hadn't been brought to our attention. When we talk about driver files and driver qualifications, those of you that are catching the replay or listening, these things are important, guys. We cannot skip over this information. This is the way that we're going to survive, or we will be shut down. Okay, if it's too complex, you understand, here is the resource. I can't explain or express that again when I tell you they're amazing, they're great. We've had opportunities to work with them in different capacities, especially at the Mid-America Trucking Show. Amazing feedback from other members that have had an opportunity to get involved and really ensure that their business was in shape. All right, so you got the information. Kim, can I just have you read off how they can reach you, telephone number, email, and your website?
Absolutely. So you can reach me personally. And the easiest way to remember this, it's K Clater, just my first initial last name, K Clater at FleetSafeSolutions.com. Val and Rick is RFORE at FleetSafeSolutions.com. Val is V Connor at FleetSafeSolutions.com. It would be best if you're going to call. I would recommend calling me at 804-210-5463. That is my office number. I will give you my cell, 540-460-1565, and I can connect you to Rick and Val as well. So don't hesitate. Reach out. We'd be glad to help you guys with anything. So y'all have a safe and great day, and thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome. And thank you guys so much for being a part of us and being a part of what's great. That's our job is to make the industry better, safer, stronger, more compliant. All right. So make sure you visit us at www.aawta.org. Again, that's www.aawta.org. We look forward to seeing you at the summit next month. My gosh, you guys are coming in strong. Thank you so much again for all that have tuned in from Virginia, from Florida, from Atlanta, all over the place. We're excited to see you. We will get this information to those of you that have registered out to you so that you can take your time and go through the presentation. And again, if you're catching the replay, please make sure that you reach out to Kim. Let them know that you watched the replay and that, hey, I need you. Help me, help me, help me. And they're definitely going to be there to help. Everybody have an amazing day. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you for being a member. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Nicole. Bye-bye.